Well, blue skies out there, but it is a bit windy. We had the storms come through last night. Didn't really get much of anything as far as severe weather, so I don't have any footage for you. However, yeah, we've got that cold air coming south, and let's take a look at the map and see what's going on. Across the southwestern U.S., it is starting to look like summer in some areas. See that right there? We haven't seen that in a long time. That's the southwestern U.S. heat low starting to take hold, and it's normal to see at this time of year. Usually it really starts increasing in strength around May and June. And with that, we see widespread 100-degree readings in the deserts there. The old Pacific front has come through Texas all the way down to the Rio Grande River, and there it is, just east of Chihuahua. You can see the air mass has come through El Paso there. They've got easterly winds gusting to 20 miles an hour. And what's driving all that? This high pressure across Colorado. 1021 millibar high, and then we've got that cold air advection coming out from that high. So do we have any return flow? No. The Gulf is completely shut down. So it's going to take another day or two to get moisture back up into the southern plains. This is a pretty neat loop showing the front passing the Rio Grande into Mexico, and out ahead of it you can see this gravity wave. Yeah, watch this gravity wave as we go forward in time. See how it hits those mountains and triggers some orographic convection, and then we see storms really blow up there. Huge anvil coming off that complex of cells right there. And other cells going up in the Monterey area. The southeastern U.S. dominated by the cold front and a squall line. Actually, two squall lines. One's right along the front itself, and the other is further back in the cold air. That's around Chattanooga and Knoxville. Out ahead of that front, lots of 80s. Dew points are not terribly high, lots of 50s dew points, so that means these storms are going to be a little bit elevated. But as you go further south, you get into a little bit better moisture down in Florida. And there's the squall line there. Let's run that back 24 hours. Yeah, this is pretty good because we can see the squall line take formation there in Oklahoma. In fact, go back a little further. Yeah, see how it comes out of Kansas. Then it moves south. Not much to say about that. Few bow echo segments along the leading edge of that squall line. But it wasn't terribly strong. I would say we got some gusts here of about 40 to 50 miles an hour. And you can see that it moved southward through Austin and Houston as it kind of began dissipating towards morning and pushed all the way out into the Gulf. So quite a fast-moving line. There's the Spc Storm Reports. This is through about 7 a.m. and you can see it starts out as hail around southern Oklahoma, Oklahoma City, and kind of evolves into a wind event. And just going quickly through the wind reports. Yeah, this looks like lots of trees down. And in Huntsville, Texas, yeah, looks like one fatality there. Tree coming down on a house, and it was about 3:20 a.m. and the victim was trapped inside that house. And I'm seeing 52 knots at Gray Army Airfield near Temple, 50 knots at DFW, 60 miles an hour around Seagoville. So not a terribly major event, but at least, it was certainly something. On the northern edge there in Georgia and Alabama, some elevated cells coming together, and then there's another segment further back in Kentucky. And then as we go through 10, 11 a.m., you can see that squall line there in Knoxville coming together, and things firing along that cold front also. And looks like we got a third little cluster of cells. That's probably back near the cold core low around Evansville and Indianapolis. But we can see that this is not something we're going to have to worry too much about. Just a marginal risk for Georgia and surrounding states. And just a quick and dirty limited destabilization, so we don't have much CAPE. And they're looking for a slight increase in the severe threat across Georgia this evening as the low-level flow strengthens. And we can just take a quick look at the forecast sounding. This is going to be about 6 p.m. in east central Georgia. We'll just see what the profiles look like. And yeah, there is some instability, mostly in the lower levels below 10,000 feet. But we have this little Cape robber feature there. And that's going to cut into the Cape. And you can see the positive area does not have much vertical extent. And Cape's only, wow, only 200. Yeah, that is pretty limited. And we can see the limited moisture is a problem. Dew points at 60 near the surface and tapering off rapidly to 50s up at about 5,000 feet. Now, if you're interested in this little Cape robber feature, what we can do is we can grab the temperature. This is going to be 500 millibars. So that's going to be about 11 Celsius. So we know 11 Celsius is going to be too warm. We really want that down near 15 to minus 18. So let's look at the 500 millibar temperatures. So there it is. We can visualize that little feature there. Kind of a little thermal axis running through Georgia right there. And if we bring up the cursor, you've got this neat little feature there where you can get a cursor readout. That's up at the top right there. And you can see those minus 11 Celsius values. That's going to be too warm for good Cape. And we really have to go up to Ohio practically, where it's minus 15 Celsius, but the problem is you get further away from the better moisture. So this is not a very good setup. The better low-level moisture is really not in phase with the colder upper air temperatures. Now, as this feature digs, you can see this ball of very cold air coming. That's approaching the area, but that's not going to arrive until after midnight. See, now it's starting to cool quite a bit in Georgia, but that's towards dawn. That's not going to be of much help. And as we can see, by that time, the activity is going to be well to the east, in eastern North Carolina and Virginia. So the storms are just kind of outrunning the good upper air support. There's how things look in the northeast U.S. In the previous map, you might remember there was a little low in the Washington, D.C. area. That was bad data, and I went ahead and removed that. Thankfully, Digital Atmosphere lets you basically select the station, and you can go in and edit the values and basically remove bad data. So that can be pretty convenient. So that's what I went ahead and did. And you can see the 70s go all the way up to this triple point near the Pittsburgh area. And then north of that, we've got the cooler air on both sides of the secluded front. And there's the old occlusion there in Michigan. That might be a little bit to the west there because of that south wind along Lake Michigan. But in any case, we've got the cold air coming down through the Midwest. Lots of 50s and 60s, and it's all being driven by this big ridge extending from the Dakotas all the way up to Ontario. And there's our radar composite there in the northeast U.S. The range is now getting to Pittsburgh and eastern West Virginia. And it looks like a little deformation zone activity near that occlusion. And of course, a lot of this across Illinois, that's going to be associated with the cold upper level low. And there's the long wave infrared imagery. A couple things that you can see on here is the lack of cold tops in the Appalachians. So those cells that we have in Georgia, the Carolinas, really not doing much. The better cells are off in the Gulf of Mexico. And the other feature is you can see a dry slot working up into Indiana there. And then north of that, this looks like the occlusion there in western Michigan. So those are a couple features that can tie your analysis together. And looking out to the west, looks like a classic ridge there. It's almost like a gate keeping out all the moisture. So that's something I would look for on the upper air chart. Some evidence of a ridge from about Las Vegas up to Montana. Yep, and there's that ridge. Pretty clear cut, isn't it? The long wave ridge is going to run something like that there. And also showing the very deep upper level low. Looks like the upper low is pretty much centered right around the Champaign, Illinois area, with a pretty good trough extending all the way down toward Memphis. And here's what we're going for in the northwest U.S. Looks like that high pressure out in the Pacific starting to break. I'm seeing some lower pressures off the coast, Seattle, Vancouver, way out there, and we're starting to see the return of rain. And I think this is probably a warm front there. Conditions south of that warm front, pretty warm, as we would expect. And then following that all the way up to Alberta, looks like kind of a weak little low there, dividing 60s from the north, from mid-70s down to the south. Even got 79 there in the Great Falls area. And wow, look at Boise, 86. And 89 up in, I guess that would be Winnemucca. Yeah, this is definitely a warm air mass. No question about that. And for our friends in Europe, this is what I'm getting for a rough surface analysis. Looks like that old cold front is kind of stalled out there in northern Italy, southern France. And the main occlusion looks like it's coming on shore there in the British Isles. So looks like that low is right there south of Dublin. And I can kind of make out the occlusion extending across the area north of Leeds out towards northern Netherlands. Okay, for our short-term forecast, let's just take a quick look in the southeast. We know that this stuff here is going to be kind of low-topped, not very severe. And let's just see how it evolves over the evening hours. Looks like a little bit of organization there along the cold front as it moves out towards Athens and towards Savannah. Little MCS coming together there in the Valdosta area about midnight. And looks like that kind of gradually falls apart and becomes a little more elevated. Remember, the better support is way out here. However, these cells are being driven rapidly eastward by the cold pool they're laying down, so they don't have much of a chance to take advantage of that better instability. So we just end up with this MCS moving across eastern South Carolina, North Carolina, around dawn and off towards the East Coast. And I would expect the tail end of this towards afternoon to really flare up, so things could get interesting there in southern Florida. And then just a quick look at our forecast, since I need to get this production out the door. Front locations are about like that, and of course we've got our other system up there in Alberta, probably connecting back up, something like that. The big thing that we see is this ridge extending from Ontario down through the Dakotas, and even all the way into Texas. So no wonder we got the blue skies in our area here. But the southerly flow starting up in the high plains. So for tomorrow, we're going to see that high move offshore into the southeast Texas coast. And the southerly flow picks up on the high plains. And we're starting to tap the moisture coming up from the Gulf. In the eastern U.S., that front moves offshore, passing through Delaware and New Jersey there. Looks like our warm front is about like that, with our occlusion north. There's our cold pool, so it is going to be pretty showery in Ohio, eastern Kentucky, and maybe Pittsburgh tomorrow evening. Things are getting unsettled out west. This looks to be a new Pacific front, so probably bye-bye to those 80s in northern Nevada. See, that's a large area of cold air advection coming inland with showers. Then by Friday night, looks like that cold air is made in advance, something like that. Maybe a frontal system coming together there in Manitoba. Stagnant high across the central Gulf Coast there, and our occlusion looks like that's kind of hanging on there in the Delaware area. And there's the cold pool off the Virginia coast. Looks like that's shifted eastward, kind of like that there. And then the next big change, let's see, that's going to be, I don't know, Saturday we got this little cold front coming south, connecting back into that Pacific system, and you see the big gradient there with thickness lines. So that's definitely a front there in California and Utah. And let's see what happens. Looks like that front just kind of stays in place. A couple waves moving east to west. And then south of that, we've got the lee side trough, which has stolen my cursor. Yeah, there's the lee side trough. All the way down to Texas Monday. And let's see our next big change. Cold front coming south on Tuesday night. And some good upslope for later next week. See that gradient there? Could be some decent storms there around the Clayton, Trinidad, and Boise City area. But that's pretty far out. And yeah, cold air advection building back in, so it looks like that kind of drives the front southwestward late next week. And more cold air, you know. Surprise, surprise, surprise. That's on the 8th. So yeah, snow for upstate New York is a possibility. 1034 millibar high coming down into Texas. So we're just not quite over with winter here. All right, let me get this edited and uploaded since it's already, 5:32. And it's going to take 30 to 45 minutes to render this and more time to upload. So let me get that started. Hope you all have a great evening and enjoy the little break in the weather. And I'm sure things will be getting active once again here in the next few days. And keep in mind that we do count a lot on your support. So here's our link. I'm going to pop this up for Patreon. If you sign up, you will get access to the private weekend streams, which happen sometime between Saturday and Monday, so you'll have access to that. Otherwise, we will see you tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.